Hey y'all, a new episode of Get Real with Casey Kasem is here. On this episode, I sat down with Linda Godfrey, who you may know on Twitter at Lindellians. You can catch her with Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life, as host of the Locked On Pokes podcast, as co-host of Fantasy Besties, and as the kicker extraordinaire. We had an excellent conversation talking about all kinds of things, such as being competitive, whether or not she still has Blake Jarwin love, her favorite football position outside of kicker, not watching the NFL when she first started playing fantasy football, and how she got started putting out content. Plus, so much more. Make sure to follow Linda on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at DKCKasem and the podcast on Twitter at GetReal_pod. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP network. And now, here is my conversation with Linda Godfrey. Yes, this is so awesome. Linda, I am listen, Linda, I'm very happy. I did not mean for that to come out the way it just did, but listen, Linda, I'm so happy to have you here on Get Real tonight. Thank you for coming on. How about that? Thank you so much for coming on. I've been really wanting to sit down and talk with you, and I'm sure that everybody that's listening to this right now really wants to get to know you as well.
Well, thank you for having me on. We got to meet briefly at the expo, and that was great. And I love listening to this podcast, and it's such a cool way to get to know people a little bit deeper in the industry. So I was thrilled to do it.
Well, I mean, and I'm thrilled to be able to share your story with everybody out there. So we'll get started, and we'll ask you probably the easiest question you're going to get tonight, which is, how many times do people messed up your Twitter handle when they're saying it?
Well, pretty regularly, but it's kind of my own fault because I didn't realize that it didn't come across how I read it as Lindellians, and that people were a buddy of mine that I like co-manage all of my home leagues with was like, it looks like Lindell Lions, right? And I was like, what? It's too late now. Like it's every handle, Xbox, Instagram, any handle I've ever had ever is Lindellians. I was like, I'm committed. So that was my bad. And so anytime people get it wrong, we just move on. Like that's my fault. So
yeah, you know what?
It happens all the time.
Words have different pronunciations, and you know what? That's how it's spelled. That's how it in my brain. That's how it would be spelled too. So
yeah, I had to start going like Funyuns, and then I was like, I don't know if I want to be associated with the Funyun girl. Like I don't. So I just committed to
hashtag it. Brand. That's a great brand to be known for. But let's go and talk about when you started out. Let's say back in the days when you were a young child. Were you involved in sports in any way? Did you enjoy watching sports, or was sports any part of your life at all?
Yeah, well, I have a big brother, and he specifically played football, and especially when he was in high school, we had a really good high school football team. He didn't see the field a lot, but my mom wasn't going to let me get up and move from that seat. All my friends are like playing catch or whatever over on the grass. She's like, you're going to sit here and watch to see if your brother ends up in this football game. We're cheering for him. So like, she's like, I don't understand how you became this big football fan. I'm like, it's literally your fault. I had to learn. I was sitting there anyway. I might as well figure out what's going to happen, like what's happening. And, but I played basketball. I played golf. I went to college to play golf. So I played sports. I wasn't very good at the like super athletic ones, the ones with like running, not my strong suit. I'm not very coordinated. But I've always enjoyed them. I like, I'll play dodgeball with the best of them.
Yes, that's the greatest. I love it too. When I used to work with kids, I was like, every day is going to be dodgeball day because, I mean, hello.
That's what I'm good at.
So how did you, well, let me ask you about the NFL in particular. Did you watch the NFL growing up? Was there any kind of, exposure to that?
Not particularly. Like I watched a ton of college ball growing up. We were Oklahoma State fans at my house, and so we were watching any televised event of that ever, plus going to games that's very close to my hometown. But NFL, I didn't really start watching. I started playing fantasy football before I started actively watching every NFL game. And then like once I got the fantasy bug, I was like, oh, I better watch more football. Like I need to know more of these people, not just like Broncos players. So I really started watching NFL after I got into fantasy football.
So how exactly did you get involved with fantasy football then?
Oh man. Well, the very first league I played in, my dad needed somebody to play, like they needed one more person for a work league. And I was working like 12 hours a day. I had a 7-month-old kid. I'm like, "Dad, I don't have time for this." I was like, "I can't." He was like, "I will draft it if you will just set the lineups." Okay, fine. I don't know what that means, but you got it. So he drafted my first team. I set lineups. I realized the fun in like watching a player and just like the high you get from the just the projection bar is like good enough for me. When it's like you're probably going to win, I'm like, I know it. I know I am. And that high was like losing those projected win weeks and stuff like that is more appealing to me. Like that's why I keep coming back, because I don't like being wrong. And so like wins are great, but it's like the tough losses that always keep me coming back.
So that's so interesting to me because most people are like, obviously I watched football growing up or whatever, and then here you are like getting into fantasy football without even having, that experience. So how long did it take for you to actually start watching NFL?
I probably played I probably played 2 years of fantasy football before I bought all the way in and got NFL Red Zone and committed all the way to like Sundays we watch football, and also Mondays and Thursdays, and also Saturday because we're still watching college football. And sometimes I play on Friday. Like football season becomes a pretty insane time when the schedules are both full. But it probably took 2 years of playing fantasy football before I was like, I did one with my dad, and then I co-managed one with uh, Piper's dad when we were still together. And
Mhm.
then I was like, "Oh, I don't want to do that with somebody anymore. Like, I want to make the decisions. I want to do the draft. I want to do all the things."
Right
And that
on.
was when I was like, "Well, now I also have to watch all the games too."
So how did Denver become the team that you were interested in?
One of my friends growing up was from Denver. She moved here in like 3rd grade. We were very close. She lived like right around the corner from me. And her parents would watch the Broncos on Sundays, and I stayed the night over there a ton. And so I got some exposure that way. And it was just like, I have to hold on to something. And that's where I ended up.
That's awesome. And Oklahoma doesn't have an NFL team, sadly. So I can get why that wasn't really on your radar when you were growing up. It's more of a college state, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
both very big
Yeah.
colleges. And, like, being closer to Denver, like, I didn't pick something so far out of reach that, like, I can't ever go, you know what I mean?
Exactly, right?
It was, like, Denver or Kansas City, and I think I made the right choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, and there was a point in time when being a Denver Broncos fan was the highest of the high, so
Yeah, a point
you
in
know,
time. It was a couple years ago now, but
yeah.
I do remember it.
Well,
Yeah, I
I
know, we
feel
don't
you, I
have to.
feel you. I think most of us, yeah. So, okay, so talking about Dynasty or not Dynasty, we weren't talking about Dynasty. I wanted to talk to you about Dynasty because of the college football aspect of everything. Do you play Dynasty do you have your hands in a lot of different things?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I played Dynasty. I found fantasy football Twitter. Like, I was always following, like, the Matt Harmons of the world where you were getting, like, specific nuggets. And then when I realized, like, oh, there's a whole community of people that are just, like, talking about this constantly, that was really where the sickness took off. It was a problem. But, like, getting to talk to those people, and I forgot the question. Oh, Dynasty.
Dynasty,
Figuring
yeah.
out that there was an entire off season where you could be in season was I was like, "Oh, I went in on that." And I'm not very good at it yet. Values and age and all the things. It's a lot for me to try to sort through. Trading is not my favorite thing in the world, but I'm trying to get better at it. But it is fun to like go in and look at rookies and make your decisions and trust your process. And I talked about this yesterday on a podcast, but like committing to my process was a thing that was my lesson this year. It's like I let people talk me into Robert Woods when I
Mm.
was drafting Cooper Cup. And like that was just because the mentality on Twitter is if you believe something that everybody else doesn't believe, that's like, you don't want to be on that side of things.
Yeah.
And
I could chew
so
on that, yeah.
I started drafting Robert Woods. I drafted Robert Woods and Scott Fishbowl. So that was my dynasty lesson. That's how I'm gonna go into this season of Dynasty. It's only my third season playing though.
Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't played Dynasty for that long either, so it's like such a learning process. And I was so bad whenever I drafted. I mean, I'm rebuilding forever. I'm never. I don't think I'm ever getting out of this hole. But speaking of Twitter, because you brought that up and about like-mindedness and everything else, how did you stumble across fantasy Twitter?
Boy, I don't even know. I think Chase Holden, and I think Chase does like race cars now, like NASCAR. So he doesn't even do like fantasy football. I mean, he does a league and stuff, but he was the first one I kind of noticed, and then from there, like just checking replies and seeing conversations that I like to be a part of. Um, Beezy from the Undroppables was primal and like finding all these people. I really latched on to like him as a friend. Moose was another guy that was extremely helpful in making me feel like a welcome part of the community. So it was just like laying that ground floor and finding people that were genuine and being like, "Oh, okay," like knowing there are good people, especially getting into the Twitter arguments go bananas. And if you don't have like a home base, I can imagine that Twitter is just absolutely terrible. Like I have like a home base. These are my people, and
Hmm.
I can come to I know they're genuine good people that know me and I know, and so all the people with no faces yelling insults on Twitter mean a lot less because I know I have a safe space.
And when you're starting out, how important is it to have those people? And why do you think that it's people should go and find some sort of mentors to help them out?
I just think it's huge in terms of like how to handle a Twitter troll or just needing somebody to bounce ideas off of or trade talks or whatever it is, just to have like somebody to bounce ideas off of, I think is key. If you're just posting, you can I have done it, posted some insane comparison without like talking to somebody about it first, and then everybody be like, mm-mm. And you're like, I should have ran that by a couple people before I just threw it out to the world. And not every take is that way, but I think it's nice to have somebody to go like, am I insane for thinking this? And sometimes they're like, yeah, but I'll tweet it anyway. But other times, there it's nice to have somebody that builds you up
Right.
and makes you feel like you are welcomed and valuable in this space.
And you have been in this space for a few years now. And do you can you tell everybody the process of getting involved in actually being not just a fan, but actually getting to put out content on fantasy football?
Man, everybody there's sites for days looking for writers. Now, you may have to do it for free for a while and it sucks but if you really want to do it, if you want to create content, put pen to paper. It's very easy to you will find that it's a lot easier to write a couple paragraphs than you might think. And then also but just put yourself out there, make connections, reply to people. My advice is don't post polls because it doesn't give people a chance to like actually talk about their opinion. I think just ask a question and let it take off from there. But just putting yourself out there, be yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not because then nobody knows, what you is going to show up that day. It's just it's a lot of marketing, like yourself, and that sucks. It's not fun to do. You want to just be able to say, "Hey, these are the numbers and I'm right all the time." But that's not enough, unfortunately. You have to be able to be presentable and talk to people and listen to people as well, not just talk.
And what's something that you think someone could take from your experience starting out? What is something that you wish somebody would have told you that is a golden nugget right there?
Well, I don't want to get like too specific and especially not to like only give advice to women or like but the you have to value like I said, you have to value yourself and find people that value you. I I went through a lot of people that didn't value my opinion, that wanted a female's voice associated with them because they didn't have one and they needed that tick towards minorities, but it's not a fun place to be to find out that you're that person. So my advice and the thing that I've learned is like to ve- make sure that the people that you think value you actually do. And it's very easy. There are cues, let me tell you, because looking back, I was like, oh, there it was obvious, and also there. And so you just have to just really pay attention to the people that you're trusting with your content or your personality or just yourself as a person.
100% I agree with that. You know, I'm kind of a pushover when it comes to a lot of things. I say yes to a lot of stuff. So I mean, sometimes you just have to like take a step back and you have to have yourself in the best interest, So
Yeah.
finding the people that I agree with you. So how did you find those people at first to go and write for?
I had people actually, I had tweeted about an experience that I had had that I had found out that I was being like I don't touted as the token female of a group, and I didn't like that at all. I don't wanna be that. I just wanna be a fantasy football analyst. That's
Right
it.
on.
I don't need the extra parts. And, so somebody reached out. They said, "You can write about whatever the hell you want." And they let me. I mean, they let me really have a lot of creative freedom. It was very fun. I did horoscopes, I did all kinds of fun stuff just trying to find my voice.
Mhm.
And they were very gracious when I had to step back, and I still support them. I like what they're doing over there. They've transitioned over to fantasy baseball for the time being, but it's just you just have to there's some trial and error, you know? Sometimes it's not gonna work, and you have to like you said, I'm a pushover too, I have no backbone.
Mhm.
Like, I will I have to, like, really, really try to say no when, like, people invite me to
Mhm.
leagues that I know I don't have room for and
Yep.
stuff. I'm not good at it. I just don't ask me because 'cause I'm not it makes me uncomfortable to say no, and that's a problem, especially like you said, you just get every, "Oh, yeah, I'll do it, whatever you."
Mhm.
Sure. And then all of a sudden you don't have time for yourself. So you gotta fill your own cup, take a step back, do your own thing, be able to say no. That's so important.
Oh, and you brought up that you're a mother. So like how is balancing being a mother and then having this whole side and having, to a job and doing all this other stuff? Like how do you balance all of it?
I get like I'm very lucky to have her dad who watches her usually every other week on like the second half of the week or on weekends if I need to do something or if I have a show come up. He's more than happy to take her for the evening. Both my mom, his parents, everybody, she has like 98 grandparents. They're all super helpful. I'm very lucky. I also have fantastic neighbors who have kids. They don't mind if she goes over there. And I'm very open with her about, some nights she's like, "You have another show." And I'm like, "I know that you hate it, but I'm trying to tell her, like, I'm chasing a dream. The point of this
Mhm.
is that I don't someday have to work an 8 to 5 job, that we can create our own schedule and do what we want." So I'm very open with her about why I'm doing what I'm doing and how often I'm working at it. And
Mhm.
she's super supportive. Before every show, I get a kiss and a good luck. And, she's the best 7-year-old that ever lived.
That is awesome, because I don't have children, so I don't know that experience and how that is, and I'm like, "Okay, one day," and then I'm like, "Okay," like, I can barely handle it
Ugh.
right now, like
And yeah, and with public school and
Yeah.
COVID and all
Yeah,
it's
all
like
that.
it's been insane. Last week was the first week that I worked all 5 days since Thanksgiving. Like, it's
Wow.
just been she's home or I'm home or somebody at work is sick, and I'm like, I'm so ready to get back on a schedule. I feel so out of whack.
I mean, I get you on that completely. I need to have that set in stone schedule. S What about podcasting? I wanna know, how did that kind of become a thing that you started doing?
Well, I was very scared to podcast. I still get, like, nervous jitters right before a show. I think I probably always will. But it was something I always wanted to do. I like to write just fine, but it's a long and grueling process for me. I'm very, very critical of my writing, and then that keeps me from finishing a paragraph. I will rewrite the same sentence 48 times.
Mhm.
I have to, like, you can't proof while you're writing. I just have to, like, write. And so with talking, I'm like, I talk all the time. I'll talk to the wall if I have to. I have
Mm-hmm.
no problem carrying a conversation. I will talk.
Yeah.
And so I was like, if you could just man up and talk into a microphone, you could do this podcasting thing. And I was very, very nervous. And Troy King reached out to me, and John Bauer and Mitch Sorensen had reached out to Troy and wanted to start a podcast. They wanted one more person. And Troy reached out to me, and I was like, I have never done that. I don't have a micro. I just bought a laptop. Like, that seems like a big step. And everybody's like, oh, just be yourself. People will like you. Mm, am I, I don't know. I'm sometimes a whole lot.
Yeah,
So
I'm the same way.
it was very, very nerve-wracking, but I wanted to do it. I wanted to get behind a microphone and be able to talk with all of my Twitter friends that I'd been talking to for a year, and Troy convinced me to do it, and I got to do a year and a half of a show with those three guys, and they built my confidence up. And we still talk almost every day, and they just really helped me see that I had, like, I could do this. And so now I do shows when, like, there are some times where I still message them and I'm like, I just want to thank you guys again for pushing me to do it in the first place, because if nobody pushed me, I don't think I would have.
I love that because the community aspect of it all that we were talking about earlier, it's just so cool to have that kind of group that'll pick you up when you're feeling like, I don't know, I'm not so confident. It's good. Do you ever get, because people come on here and talk about it, do you ever feel like the imposter syndrome? Like, what's going on? Like, how am
Yes.
I,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scott Fish got mad at me because I signed up for the Scott Fish Bowl as a fan, not an analyst. And he messaged me and he was like, there's no reason. Like, I get it. We all have that imposter syndrome. But it sucks, and it creeps in like every aspect all the time. Like, there are days where I'm like, am I raising a human okay? Am I, doing the best I can at work? Like, I probably don't deserve this, blah, blah, blah. So it's just a demon you have to fight, I think. But for sure, I get it all the time in this space where I'm like, am I just the weird drunk aunt that talks about kickers? Like, is that is that my ceiling? Which is fine. If that's
I'd
my
be
ceiling,
cool with being known like that,
if that's my ceiling, I'll take it. But there's definitely days where I'm like, I maybe I don't want to think that's my ceiling, but the days that I do are days where I'm like, am I wasting my time? Do I offer enough value to this space? Am I giving enough of myself? Am I trying my hardest? I shouldn't be, I'm watching, like, my friends that could spout off numbers. They'll just throw it at you. They'll just throw stats at you that they've memorized since like 2013. Meanwhile, I'll look at a stat one time, go to put it somewhere else, and I have to go back and check and be
yeah.
like, did I get this right? Like, I
Mhm.
I will write it down. I bring my notes to my shows. I have to do it. I have to write it down several times for it to even kind of imprint. And I have friends that can just throw 2006 stats at you. And so there's always some, like, am I worthy of whatever's happening? But I try to put those thoughts at bay.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up about feeling that way because I feel that way sometimes too. And I even like the burnout situation that can happen because you feel like you're not as, worthy, or that you feel like everybody else is passing you by and you're over here in the corner like, I'm sorry, so that's how I've been feeling up and down, up and down. But at the end of the day, I mean, we're all, it's not like one of these things. And the funny thing is, I was talking to somebody who was like, isn't it like a competition when it comes to being a fantasy analyst or being in the fantasy space? It's not. I get it that we're all like trying to get jobs and all that jazz, but at the end of the day, we're all,
Yeah.
friends at least, or at least we
Yeah.
can get along. And there's a
Yeah.
few bad apples everywhere, but
Some
that happens
stragglers.
everywhere. Who cares? It happens.
Yeah,
So,
I
yeah.
totally agree though. It's not super. I don't feel competitive. I don't feel like I'm competing with anybody but myself personally. Like, I, can I do better than what I'm doing right now is usually the context of how I'm comparing myself. Watching, giving advice, and then I don't even watch like my leagues play out on game day. I'm watching for the advice I gave,
Mhm.
noticing, like, anything I might have missed in that analysis. And so I'm always competing with myself to be better, but I don't ever want to make it about competing with who I would consider my colleagues. I have 3,000 of them, and they're all on Twitter, and it's fantastic. I love the atmosphere. I love the hype. I think pretty generally you see mostly positive vibes under posts where people have
Yeah.
gotten full-time jobs. So, there's redeeming qualities about fantasy Twitter. People don't, I know there are days where it sucks, but there are redeeming qualities.
My favorite thing lately is just I haven't had any crap come across my timeline, so I'm thinking I'm, like, muting the right words or I'm blocking the right people or muting I don't know, but I've been very excited about only paying attention to, like, important
Yeah.
things, you know what I mean?
I love
So
when you get that algorithm tweaked just right, where it's like,
yeah, you're
people are
like,
like, "Can you
sweet
believe
spot.
that?" And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even see it.
I
Fantastic.
know,
I'm
I've seen all
crushing
this
it."
stuff with, like, more drama going on Twitter. I'm like, "Where? I'm not seeing it." Yes, sweet. I finally
I
got past
crushed
all
it.
of that crap. So you brought up Scott Fishbowl. You brought up Scott Fish and signing up for the Scott Fishbowl. Scott Fish has been a guest on. He's an amazing human being. We all know that. First of all, how many years have you been in the Scott Fishbowl?
2. The
2.
last 2 I've been in a Scott Fishbowl.
And you weren't signed up as a fan, right? I know you said that he told you you changed it, right?
Yeah, you made me change
Okay.
it.
Okay.
You made
So
made me change it.
so you've been in there twice. So you haven't been there during the time. I mean, you were there for 1 year when there was no kicker, but this last go around, he added a couple little wrinkles into the situation, and you're a big proponent for kickers, and you're a big, obviously everybody knows you as, kickers. I know, like, it's something awesome to be known for. So, um, how was that experience this year in Scott Fishbowl compared to the first year you played?
Well, it was first of all, it was fun as hell that he included kickers in a way where if you wanted to play with them, you could. If you didn't want to play with them, you didn't have to. It gave me a chance to I got to dive into the specific scoring for Scott Fishbowl. I got really good at spreadsheets getting ready for Scott Fishbowl and like trying to get something out about how kickers had scored the previous year if they would have been in the SFB. So it was really fun for me to be a part of that. There was obviously still a lot of pushback, a lot of weird takes. The thing that's curious to me is that most of the kicker hate and like ban kickers, anti whatever cutesy fun hashtag you want to use, is that it's all people in the industry. It is very rarely people that play fantasy football coming to you for advice. Rarely. I would say 90% of the time, it's industry people that have the issue.
Mm.
Which is funny because we're trying to give to the people that are playing. I don't care if I not but just to use you as an example, I'm not giving you advice. You play fantasy football, you know what you're doing. I'm not here to tell you how to play. I'm here trying to help people looking for advice, and everybody else that's also doing the same thing as me that's trying to get this job done is alienating an entire group. And whether they want to believe it or not, most of the fantasy football leagues in play today still play with kickers. I would say, again, 70 to 80% of them. So just the way they talk about it and like alienating it, it's weird to me, but it's also been great for me because I'm one of the only ones giving that particular advice.
I watched something today, and they were talking about, it was Pat Flynn was talking about how you should try to find, when you're putting out a podcast, instead of casting a big net and trying to bring in a bunch of people, having that one special, thing before anybody else does, or being the best at it or whatever, trying to achieve that. That's something that you should look to try to do. So, was kickers just something that one day you decided that's just what I want to write about, or was there a reason why kickers were what
Too.
you were
Wouldn't
feeling?
that be psychotic if I was just like, I'm gonna do
Oh.
it. Um, no. So my dad kicked at Oklahoma State. He was a kicker. I have absolutely no upper body strength at all. So when we would go play like football in the yard, I was punting the football. I'm not going to throw it. It's not going to get to you. There's no reason for this. And so, I'm kicking it. My dad was a kicker. I like things that people tend to not like. Nickelback, candy corn.
I like candy corn. My wife likes Nickelback, so there you go.
Perfect. But like I the thing with kickers is they're either the game winner. There's like no in between. People are either love them or hate them, or they don't exist in their mind. So I I hate when they get all the hate and then there's absolutely no love for winning games like there was this weekend. What a
That's what I
fantastic
was
weekend slate
just
for me. It was great.
yeah. I was about to say
But
those games and the kicking, exactly. Kicking was very important.
every game ended, every regulation game ended with a kick going through the uprights. That's all I'm saying. And sure, people are like, it doesn't matter in fantasy football unless you have the upside and you play the right kicker, and then it absolutely matters. I won a
Mhm.
game against Jonathan Taylor that week that he scored 5 touchdowns. One of my players played like 2 minutes and got hurt. And then Evan McPherson scored like 22 points and I ended up winning. So don't tell me that they can't win you a game if you manage to make the right decision. And if you're worried about how random they are, then I say also take tight end out of your fantasy leagues.
I hate tight end, but you know what? I love tight end and I hate tight end. Like it's my favorite
Hey,
position, but it's my least favorite position in fantasy football. So it's just
I
like
know.
ah.
It's the funnest to try to guess though. Like
Yeah.
I think like in terms of we every off season there we all decide on the same sleeper and then everybody's just like all in. and
All
we're
in.
like we haven't been right ever. It's
Ever.
fantastic.
I'm just gonna throw a dart next year and be like, there's a lot of reasons why. Let me tell you, but it kind of feels like that sometimes. But speaking of wanting to get rid of kickers and stuff, and the whole like kickers versus having versus not having, same thing kind of with redraft and dynasty. A lot of the times you hear, I'm sorry, redraft is played a lot more than dynasty, a lot more.
Also better.
So I mean, I'm not going to take sides. I love both equally. How about that? It's like picking a child. Like
The first one.
the first one. I played redraft to start, so I mean, I have a special spot in my heart, and I have kickers in most of my leagues. Are you any dynasty leagues where they have kickers?
Yeah, but only because they added them. So I would say yes to being in the leagues.
I love how
'Cause
people
they
can manipulate you based on what you
yeah.
like.
Yeah, it was kind of bullshit, but I am in some with kickers, and I don't suggest the kickers should be in dynasty leagues. They change teams pretty regularly. We saw that happen this season. There was Joey Sly was on like 5 teams this season. But I just and I agree. The conversation like when redraft first starts getting underway, we've been doing dynasty for 8 months, all right? It's just for 1 minute and the dynasty side like it becomes this like shaming of people that play redraft or 10 team leagues or whatever it
Oh
is.
man, just let
It's a
people be
hobby,
happy.
bro. Yeah,
Yeah,
why
right.
are
Just let
you
people be
just let
happy.
them have fun. It doesn't have to be that big of a deal.
I mean, it doesn't, but
I
people get stuck in their ways. They don't want to.
I
They don't want
know.
to change. They don't like change. I've been doing this forever. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so in Scott Fishbowl though, so I've been in it a few years, and with the kicker situation being part of last year's Scott Fishbowl, I was like, do I draft a kicker? Do I not draft? I didn't end up drafting kickers, but I realized that all my players I got injured or had a bye, I could just go pick up a kicker and plug them in and get decent points off of them, probably more than I'd get off a bunch of players that I already had them. Some weeks you had to start guys that you knew were going to get 0 just because.
Yeah,
So
it's a blast.
it is a blast. And for people that don't know what Scott Fishbowl is, I like to talk about it on here because I think more and more people really need to find it because that's how I found so many of my friends. So how did you hear about Scott Fishbowl?
Just through okay, I started paying attention to Scott Fishbowl season 9,
Mm-hmm.
the ninth one, and so I was like paying attention to it and I was like, "Oh, this sounds fun." And I was not going to sign up for Scott. I was like, "There's no way I'm getting in this league So I wasn't going to sign up. And then I had to have like a come to Jesus meeting with myself and be like, if you don't sign up, you're for sure not going to get in. So you have to at least sign up. Like it can't be your own fault. And so I finally talked myself into it, signed up, made it, got in my first year because I was very lucky. But like you said, it introduces you to a ton of people. And if you don't get in, do the satellite leagues. There are mock drafts. There are all kinds of ways to get involved with Scott Fishbowl, even if you don't get to make it into the actual the Scott Fishbowl. You know, it's great. It's so great for meeting people.
It is the best because I started off I was a fan, like the first however many. I won a contest to get into it. It was like, I freaking out because I'm like, how can you be in a league with this many people? And how does this work? And I've never used my fantasy league before. What is this crazy old school website that is so hard to use? You finally learn how to use it and everything's fine. But at first it's a lot.
I'm good at it now, but that first Scott Fishbowl draft, like somebody had to be like, okay, you're gonna hit this, but like they like videotaped themselves doing it, and I had to like tutorial watch it. But now we're good.
We're good now. Yeah. You gotta guys, you gotta give things chances. You've got to really, because at the end of the day, too, it doesn't affect me any what platform I'm playing on, whatever. But do you have speaking of playing in leagues and platforms and all that jazz, do you have a specific type of thing that you like in fantasy leagues that maybe is like a specific setting or like an extra some kind of wrinkle that's thrown in?
I'm okay. Like I like the super flex a lot. And of course I didn't play any super flex until I got into Dynasty. I mean, I went from a very basic 12 or 10 man league to 32 draft spots and super flex, and there's 16 people in this draft, and it was like I bit off way more than I could chew. I was very excited. I got way too excited. But so I really like Superflex. I'm trying to talk some of my home leagues into doing Superflex. I've got about 4 people on board to do a Dynasty Superflex league. So if I could get even 6 more people and do a 10 team league with my like home league guys, that would be fantastic. Because right now we talk in season and then we're like, all right, we'll see you in August when we start talking shit again.
I'm in the same kind of league. My home league's like that. And I'm the commission. I was like, hey guys, can we do this? Can we do that? And most of them are like, we don't care either way. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to make it all. I'm like, super flex, PPR. They're like, okay. And then people were like, oh, I didn't know you could put a quarterback down there. I'm like, oh, okay.
You can put a quarterback down there.
like I'm like, okay. I love it. But I started that league to try to teach people. And I'm like over here just assuming they know things. I'm like, okay, sorry. I still didn't do very well. So it doesn't matter.
We're going to get through it.
We're going to get through it. So what's your favorite? I know kickers is a thing that is near and dear to your heart, but do you have a specific player or a specific thing that you like writing about the most?
I think my favorite thing to do, and it's goofy as hell, and I love to do like my kicker tiers and talk about the streaming options and streamers in general for all of the positions that are streamable because it's fun for me. It's a challenge. But I love to write stupid horoscopes specifically for kickers. Before, like last season, I did it before every Monday night game for both kickers. And it's fun to first, I read my horoscope every day from the Ponca City News paper. It's awful. It never makes any sense, but it makes me laugh until I'm crying every day. I work with my mom. We both read them. On Fridays, there's a weekend love forecast. I read that. They're hysterical. And so last season, I started writing the horoscopes for kickers, and it's just stupid fun for me. But it's like committed. There was a time last season where I was like, I know their birthday. That's concerning. Like Tyler Bass's birthday is burned into my brain. I'm just going to know it for the rest of my life.
That's awesome. I like it. You're going to have this useless trivia that when you're at trivia one night, all your friends are going to be like, hey, Linda. And you're going to be like,
February 14th.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
No, it's easy to remember because it's Valentine's Day, but also just it's going to be there. Like I legitimately last season, every time he's on the screen, I was like, Is it a problem that I know their birthdays? It probably is. I should probably take
Probably.
a step back.
I mean, it's nice to have that special party trick, I guess. You know. So, well, Matt, I don't have any questions prepared asking you about different kickers and their ages. So that'll be for
Thank
the next
God.
time. That'll be for the next time.
I'll have to study it.
So, okay, let's move along here because I mean, so Scott Fishbowl, great place for making friends. How important also is networking and kind of getting that aspect of it?
Huge. And there's so many opportunities, especially in that particular league, to get into draft spot group chats. Like I said, mock drafts. Mock drafts for me last season on Saturday nights at like 10 p.m. Sure, after I've been drinking, maybe I'd post a link to a mock draft and say I'm gonna do, and I did something different every Saturday. I'd do two tight end or tight end premium or super flex, one QB, PPR, half PPR. I was running all kinds of mock drafts. Once we're in there, I'm asking, does anybody want to be tagged on Twitter? I'm going to post this and see what Twitter thinks about it. And I built a lot of relationships doing that last year. It's a super easy way to talk to people that you may never talk to on Twitter. Some tweets get an insane amount of replies. I'm not going to see them all. Almost 100% of the time, I'm not going to see them all. Not with the work and all the things. Some get past you, so it's just a nice way to connect with more people and a little bit more privately because there's usually just 12 people in the chat at a time.
That's a great way to connect. Yeah, I love that. I love to hear that. Mock drafts, do you find that they are really helpful, or do you think that they're really just something to pass the time and they're fun?
I don't know if they're
I mean, I guess they're helpful overall to like looking and seeing where their ADP is, but like
yeah, I like
my league's
I mean,
like my home league's like way out there. They don't
oh,
they
yeah.
don't they don't even touch the ADP. What's that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing them for home leagues. I like mock drafts. I like the ADP. I like it for
Mhm.
ADP purposes. First of all, in particular, the sleeper draft board is just super aesthetically pleasing,
Yep.
and I like to look at it. So
Yeah, it is really pretty.
that's like that's like part of it for me. But I like trying out different strategies. Going back and looking at some of my mock drafts from last season, I was like, "What the fuck were you?" If I would have
I
really
love it.
drafted this team, Jesus, it was awful. And some nights it also gives me the confidence to maybe actually take a player as high as I'm willing to take him in a mock draft. I took Justin Herbert 102 several times in mocks over the offseason just to be like, can I like actually commit to this when the time comes? Turns out I could. Wasn't that hard, but I did practice all off season.
And looking at your resume, looking at all the things that you've, had your imprint on, you're part of Matthew Berry's fantasy life. What exactly do you do with that? And can you tell everybody how that came about?
Yeah, so we do. I actually John Bauer, who, like I said at the beginning, was a friend of mine that asked me to do the podcast with Troy and Mitch. And when we were talking about, I was like, I think I'm going to try to do rankings, some kind of kicker rankings. I don't know if I'm going to do like end of season or what. And John was like, you should do week to week. And I was like, that seems like a lot of work, but also like the most accurate way to give good advice.
Yep.
And so I committed to doing that. I was posting them on Twitter I was trying to get them out by like Wednesday so people had time to go to the waiver wire. Sometimes work and life didn't really accommodate that schedule, but I tried to get them out as early as I could. And Matthew Berry asked me 1 week, middle of the season, why I had Randy Bullock solo, and I explained to him my thought process. He said these are my other two options. Told him to pick up Chris Boswell. He picked up Chris Boswell. It worked out for him. I'm not saying that's the reason I
Just
got
imagine
invited to
what would have
continue
happened if you
I know.
if you were wrong.
But I think it probably helped my resume. And he sent me a message and said, "You got a minute to talk?" And you're like, whatever yeah, I got a minute or 58, however many you need. I have those amounts of minutes.
I have those
And
amounts of minutes. 100%.
and so but it's a great group of people. Cooter Doodle's over there, Jake Trowbridge is over there. It's all people that are fully and wholly themselves and don't try to be anything but themselves. And they're funny and intelligent, and it's such a great mix of people to be involved in. I'm very, very proud to get to contribute to that with them.
And it's so rad to see like this group of you guys that are coming up right now, because like I've been in the space for a while, just kind of like watching you guys and just getting all like the like the grandma of the group that's like, oh my god, I can't believe that they hit the 10,000, or I can't believe that they just got promoted to whatever. It just makes me really happy. I feel like a grandma who's just like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to give you your birthday check this year. But um, so coming up with all like the guys that you've been talking about, and the ladies that you've been talking about and all that stuff, like, do you feel that having these people that you're coming up with at the same time is, you can kind of bounce things off of everybody? I know that we've talked about you talking to people that you could look
Yeah.
for guidance, but people that are in the same, like that came up at the same time that you did, do you
Yeah,
guys go back and forth with that kind of stuff?
absolutely. I talk to Cooter every day, like via text. We're having conversations on text message, sending TikToks, talking on Twitter. Um, so I talk to her very, very often. I bounce ideas off of her a lot. I let her know if something's made me feel uncomfortable. I'm very like she's a very good friend of mine, so we're able to talk a lot about
Yeah.
the space, and it's very nice to have that. It's very nice to get to work, be her coworker, but before any of that, we were very good friends, and it's really important to have that. And Victoria as well, and she's not, of course, with the newsletter, but she works for the Football Guys. She's
Mhm.
another great friend of mine that's experiences the same things that I experience in the fantasy football industry. So it's nice to have those people to bounce ideas off of, and to like have to like rant or bitch or complain if I need to for a minute.
When you found fantasy Twitter, were you like me, where I'm like, wow, I finally found a group of people I can talk to because my friends don't want to talk to me about, this guy that you can pick up off the waiver wire?
Yeah, and here's the thing, I thought that joining Twitter and, like, getting on podcasts and stuff like that, like, I would talk less about it to my friends. That's not true at all. I
Yeah.
work with my mom. I work next to my mom. She is my very best friend. We laugh all day long, and I will just she has no idea. She doesn't play fantasy. She doesn't know. Couldn't tell you. She couldn't tell you PPR standard, half she didn't care. But I will tell her, I tell her all the drama from Twitter, first of all. I tell her, I'll be like, and there's a sleeper, and his name's on Ross St. Brown, and people are, and she just,
I
she's
like
like,
it.
yeah, okay. Whatever you say, I'm on your side. I'm like, yeah. So it
That's
didn't
awesome.
actually help not talk about it, but I did for sure feel that way. Like I have people I can say these insane things to, and they're gonna like, we can like have a conversation about it. And they're not just gonna be like, okay, and then like move on to the next topic.
So then being able to do something like Fantasy Besties, where you're with a group of people, that can talk back and forth to you about this kind of stuff and
Absolutely.
understand what you're saying. How did that podcast come about, and how did you guys determine like how many people to have and how to have it all set up?
Well, to draw back to Scott Fishbowl, we
Mhm.
met in the I think 102 group chat my first year. And then a group of us from that chat did a best ball draft. And then the five of us that do Fantasy Besties were the only ones that ever talked in that chat. So we started another sub chat.
That's
And
awesome.
we hung out twice on like Zoom and just chatted before a football game. And we just have too much fun together, and it's silly, and we've had game shows and had days where we don't give any advice at all, but we have a good time doing it. There was no reason not to go live. We've had people come on. We started a dynasty league this year, so those
Cool.
people have got to kind of be a part of it. But they're another group of people that I talk to every day. When the group chat is quiet, I'm like, is everybody okay in here? Like, what?
Checking
This is
in.
too quiet. Like, I'll get up in the morning, there's like 50 text message already. I'm like, I can't. I'll check back in an hour. It's too
Yep.
early. But it was Scott Fishbowl, and then like just that networking, getting to know those people. And Kevin Tompkins, who I do Fantasy Besties with, also contributes to Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life newsletter. So we all, there's a lot of Venn diagrams happening.
And Kevin, I mean, he's been on the show. I started off at Fighting Chance Fantasy. He's Fighting Chance, so like that whole thing, us kind of, he I don't know. It's just really cool to see like everybody mingled together, and
Yeah.
how everybody knows. It blows my mind. I don't know. And people that are listening to this right now that have no idea what we're talking about, that have wanted to get started in the fantasy football industry, just didn't know what to do. Like, we're dropping a lot of names. You're probably like, what? But go and find these people, and you're gonna get so much knowledge. I mean, for real, there's so many people out there that can help you. And most people are very friendly. So don't be afraid to like ask somebody for advice or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely ask for advice. I think that's crucial if you want to get into this space or any space or chase any goal of yours, find somebody to ask for advice. Not just like align yourself with somebody, but legitimately say, "Hey, how did we get here? What did you do? What can I do differently?" And you have to be able to accept that some people, first of all, that some people aren't going to like you. Nobody is ever universally liked. That's just not the way it
Yeah,
works. So accept that first and foremost. And second of all, be able to accept some criticism should you need it from somebody that you trust enough to ask for advice. If you trust that person enough to ask for the advice, then you have to be ready if they give you any criticism. I think the best friends should be able to tell you, hey, this is maybe not the best way to act or say or do, whatever it might be.
agreed. Agreed. So speaking speaking of, see, here comes my I'm really scatterbrained, guys. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you already know that I ramble a lot. So this question hopefully won't be too crazy. See, look, here we go. Here the question is, she's like, yes, guys, I am having a hard time here trying to figure out what I'm asking next. But what I'm asking next is, you're the host of Locked On Pokes, and great transition. She's like, yeah, great transition. But
I
you
thought it was
are,
flawless.
yeah, it was great. I stuck the landing right there. But you're the host of that of Locked On Pokes, and you're on that show by yourself, correct?
Yes.
And how was that compared to being on a show with other co-hosts?
It took some getting used to, and it took getting to know, like, how I needed to take my notes and how I needed to do transitions, and plus you've gotta learn all the I'm not technology in me, we don't get along well, so, like, they were like, "Yeah, and you'll just edit it," and I was like, "Skirt, what are we gonna I don't I don't know how to
Editing?
do that." So, like, I've gotten a lot better at that, but
Yeah.
my first episode probably took I mean, they're 40-minute episodes max. They usually are like 22 to 30 minutes, right? My very first episode took me like 2 hours to record. I just kept erasing what I was doing. And I've gotten a lot better at, like, if I mess up one word, I can go in and take out that one word and just start from where I was at. And like I said, gotten a lot better at notes. When I first started, I would type like I was just like reading and it sounded that way. And so I've gotten better at just, okay, hit this point, and this point. And I sometimes ramble. I'll be like, I think I said, 48 times in the
Mhm.
last 12 minutes, but it's out there now. I can't do anything
Get
about
it?
it.
No,
I'm not going to re-listen to it.
I'm not.
It's committed.
That's why when I mess up, I'm gonna probably put a record scratch in there real quick and let you guys know that grouping of words that I said earlier. My therapist is like, "You're so." She's like, "When you were growing up, were you diagnosed with ADHD?" And I'm like, "No, but like I grew up in the '90s. I don't know what to tell you. Boys
Yeah.
had ADHD in the '90s, right?"
Yeah, no girls.
So okay, so when you go into something where you're just doing a podcast on your own and you're having to learn how to like do all that stuff on your own, the editing, like you were saying, and everything else, how did you go about figuring out how to do that or what you needed to look into to be able to get that done?
Well, I listen to a lot of solo pods and a lot of solo pods in different genres. I mean, I listen to some solo fantasy, some of the solo locked on hosts of different sports, and then I listen to true crime documentaries, and most of the ones I listen to are two people talking back and forth. So I went and found specifically ones where it was one person talking, just to kind of get the flow of several different. Because I don't want to sound one way ever.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I get on there and I just set it up that I'm going to go on a rant and it lasts like 12 minutes and it was an accident that I was like, "Oh, that was supposed to be a 4-minute piece." And then other times I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to talk about how good this player is and hit him with a bunch of stats." And after 2 minutes I'm like, "I don't have anything else to say because it was just like numbers and boring. So it was getting a nice like balance of giving information and also putting myself forward, if that makes sense.
It
Like
makes
I'd be cracking jokes. I don't know if anybody else thinks I'm funny, but I laugh at myself on my solo pod all the time.
And that's good. Laughter is the best medicine, right? So there you go. That's awesome. And you're very prepared for your podcast, and it shows. And like you said, being able to go in and watch other people or listen to other people and do their podcast. That's exactly what I do with the interview show. Is like go back and listen to a bunch of the interview podcasts that people do, and what kind of questions get people going, and how do you pick people's brains? Like so.
Yeah.
Have you had experience interviewing people on podcasts?
I did like 2.5 where I did like interviews, and I don't like it. Like I commend the hell out of you because, and like John hosting at
Yeah.
all, doing it by myself is fine because I'm not like tossing it around the room and making sure that everybody's talking, especially in like a bigger setting. And I don't have to like, I don't know. I'm not good at the questions. I'm good at answers. I can talk and talk and talk, but like I always end up veering towards talking about like I did with Victoria. She came on and we talked about our experiences, and then we veered toward all of a sudden we're talking about the Bills and who they need to hire, and like we just turned straight to football. That's just like my panic route. And so it's so hard. I commend the hell out of you because I could not do it. I was not good at it.
I don't know. It's to be seen whether or not I'm actually good at it. But you know what? I do get to learn lots of things talking to you guys, and it's really awesome that I'm able to find all this stuff out that I didn't know about you. And you brought up earlier that you like some things that other people don't like Nickelback, for instance, and all that. Jets, is that the division you were in for the Scott Fish Bowl?
Yeah, I'm not taking credit for kickers being in Scott Fish Bowl. I feel like it was definitely a ploy for Scott Fish to get people to talk about it, though, which is fun.
Yeah.
Nickelback, I will take responsibility for because I begged him to have a Nickelback division.
That's
so I could be in the Nickelback division. But like I've seen him live, it's a problem. And I know every song sounds the same. But do you know why I like that? Because I can sing every song. They're all
my wife says
right
the
in
same
my
thing.
range.
Why do I want everything? Like, why? So yeah, I'm not the biggest Nickelback fan, but you know what? They're doing what they love. I don't have to fault people for doing what they love. And if other people love what they're doing, then more power. I'm not gonna hate on anybody too bad. It might have been cool or edgy to do that back in the day, but now it's like calling the Cowboys cowgirls. It's out of style.
So tired of that joke. I'm not even a Cowboys fan. I'm tired of that joke.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I think we talked about that last year, by the way. When I saw it happening again this year, I was like, I think Casey and I talked about this.
I think I talk about it every year, especially when like they make it one and done. It's like, okay, let me hear this again. I'm used to it, but that might be a mute word I have going on. Yeah. So we're gonna go back and talk more about like leagues because I'm interested. I am always interested. You were talking earlier about having like can't say no to being in leagues. I was like that for a while. I'm trying to cut back. Do you think there's a healthy number of leagues? Is there, or is it just like
I don't know. Healthy. I'm not sure that fantasy football leagues and healthy should be used in the same, the same sentence. But I think it's probably different for everybody. When I first started, so it was like gradual for me. It was like 1 league, 2 leagues, 5 leagues, 7. That's too many. And then I was like 32. Like I don't know what. Whoops. I don't know what happened. That it just jumped so fast. And some of the leagues from especially that first pandemic off season have folded since then, and so I've lost some leagues. I dropped out of some that I wasn't active in at all, that I didn't know people in, that I ended up in because I was saying yes to everything. Yeah. And I don't like to do that, but I'm not of any value as a sitting duck. All I was doing was setting a lineup, so I wasn't actively trading anybody or I wasn't there ever. So I dropped those leagues. I think this past year I was in 29, And it was less than the season before, and it felt at least more manageable than usual. The only league that slipped my mind all the time was the Pros with Joe's league, and it wasn't setting the lineup, it was that the waivers
Oh,
ran a day
yes.
earlier,
Mhm.
and my me and the girl I play with, my co-manager, we would message each other every Wednesday morning like, "God dang it, we forgot again." We both were, like, setting alarms to remember to go check waivers.
I would forget if it wasn't for Michael, my partner, because like, he was like, "Look, this is who's on," he's like, "And we have,
Yeah,
like, 30
he's ready.
minutes." So, like, I'm like, "Okay, okay, okay." I'm like, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There's a lot going on right now." So, I would
Yeah,
luckily had that going on, or I would be, like, having to set alarms, forgetting,
yeah, we had to come up with a better system, both of us.
Are you in any other, sports fantasy leagues, like baseball, basketball, hockey, all that jazz?
No, I tried fantasy basketball and it wasn't fun, and then the next season, I was somehow in 2 fantasy basketball leagues, and it was even less fun, and, the guys that I was playing in a fantasy basketball league with that were just, like, people I met on Twitter, I talked them into doing a fantasy football league, and we've done that for 2 years now and have not ever even discussed going back to fantasy basketball. It was
Love that.
we did a home league last year. One of my buddies suggested it during the fantasy football draft. He was like, "We should also do a fantasy basketball league." And everybody was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "It sucks." And they were like, "You're gonna play." Mm.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
that's
I
how
did, and it's not fun.
nope.
You have to set your lineup, like, every single day.
Yeah, I was like fantasy
It's
baseball, I
not
was
in
like,
me.
"Nope, can't do it
Yeah,
anymore." I tried,
yeah.
and I was like, you try everything and then, figure out what you like. So it is good that you guys went to football because obviously it's still a more elite of all the fantasy.
Of all the fantasy sports. I can't believe there's, like, fantasy hockey. I can't even keep track of the puck on the ice, and people are playing fantasy. That's insane to me.
And golf, I love it. I'm just like
I do
fantasy
play
everything.
golf. I do play
You do you?
DFS golf.
There
Yeah,
you go. Because I know you had brought that up earlier about playing golf
yeah.
and everything, so that's pretty dope.
And we talked
Okay.
I've the last couple years during, like, the Masters or the US Open, all the big tournaments, I'll get together with, some of the guys in the fantasy football space and be like, "Let's bet $5 and draft a team." And, we talk shit for the weekend, 4 days of a week, and it's always a good time to kind of get out of, again, just creating, like, a little subgroup, even if it just lasts for a little bit, to get
Mhm.
to know people and make another connection that might be worth something down the road.
For college football, since we were speaking of college football when we first started and your eyes lit up and you look so excited, what there's some people, myself included, that aren't college football fans and can't find a way to get into college football. And I get that that might just be who we are as a people, but as a person who really likes football, I want to get into college football. What kind of advice do you have for someone who doesn't have a team, doesn't have whatever, has no idea, and you know?
Man, it's so tough because, like, I was born into it, like, there was
Mhm.
not an option in my house. Like I said, my dad played football there, so it was really pretty much a given thing when I was when I was born, but I'm trying to get, like, Piper into football. My kid, she's not super jazzed about it. She's a huge Chiefs fan because her dad's a Chiefs fan. She's a daddy's girl, and there's just nothing I can do about it. I've accepted it. I'm like, "I don't care as long as you promise you will always root for Oklahoma State."
There you
I'm like,
go.
"They're 2 totally different things. It's not
Mhm.
gonna piss him off." Like, it's very they're wholly separate. It's for me, I love the videos of the kids that are walk-ons that get scholarships and, like, the camaraderie with the teammates and cheering each other on. Those videos wreck me. I will cry every single time. So, it's like that, like, brotherhood, it's the excitement of, like, winning a game that I know it's like any given Sunday in the NFL, but all those dudes are making, like, ton of money,
Yeah.
and it's not like with college, it feels so much more like I'm playing for the guy beside me than it is like I'm playing because for me,
Right.
in my opinion. And I know, because I watch Oklahoma State and because I'm a Big 12 person, I learn all these backstories and hear all the struggles or anything that these guys have been through, and it just makes you like root harder. You're just like, they all just like take a piece of my heart with them. It's a problem. I'll cry every senior game because I've gotten to know these dudes over like 4 or 5 years, however long they play, you know?
Yeah.
It's brutal. I'm a mom. I'm a crier. I will cry.
I love it. Sports cries.
Everything.
I love it. And just regular cries because it's so cute and so emotional and so wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm saying awesome a lot. I feel like a lot of the things that you're saying tonight are very awesome. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So for right now, guys and gals out there, I guess Oklahoma State is going to be my college team for right now until somebody tweets at me and changes my mind on that. So if you guys are listening this far in, which you should be, make sure to let us know who I should be going for. So I have a question about, or a couple questions about kickers this season, and they're not really fantasy questions, and they probably won't be relevant in a few years because kickers are
Aren't.
a dime a down. I don't know, they're just floating around, like you said earlier. Was there a kicker that was a free agent this year that you think should have been on a team?
Well, not necessarily. My issue with this season was
Mhm.
there's a rookie kicker, Jose Borregales, who was an undrafted free agent. I was surprised that he didn't get drafted. I thought that the Jets were going to draft him. They decided not to. And he ended up getting signed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then every week they protected him on their practice squad. And so every week that a kicker went down or had an injury or got kicked off the team because he wasn't good, whatever it was, I'm like, maybe this week they won't protect him, but they knew whatever it is that they think they have with him, they're not letting anybody else touch him. And it was like so frustrating for me all season because I want to see him kicking an NFL game so bad.
Yeah.
I watched like all of his college kicks. I just want to see it. And so that was like the thing that I paid attention to. It's such a silly thing that was irrelevant to fantasy at all, but I kept an eye every week to see if they were protecting him. They did. Every single week he was protected on the practice squad.
Learning something new every day. Had no idea the behind the scenes there, what's going down with the kicker. That's awesome. I guess that's a situation to keep an eye on. That's pretty dope. Is there a kicker that you think got too much flack this year for?
I don't know. I think Michael Badgley, who kicks for the Colts, gets a lot of flack. He was not very good last year for the Chargers. And then Rodrigo Blankenship got injured. They
Yep.
brought in Michael Badgley. He was doing really well. Now everybody misses Rodrigo Blankenship. He's such a fun personality well, first of all, if you've ever watched his interview where he's talking about his Legos and his shoe collection, it's a treat. I love it. I think he's kickers are so dorky and weird, and I just love them. They just and so he got a lot of flack, I think, anytime he missed or shanked a kick, and he didn't do it very often. I think he had like 3 misses there towards the end of the season before they didn't make the playoffs, and he started getting shit for his misses, and I'm like, the stickiness of kicker misses can be very not sticky, much like touchdowns, because I think a lot of it is psychological than it is mechanisms, or like we saw with Matt Prater when the Cardinals punter was put on the COVID list and they didn't have a holder. And so they put Colt McCoy out there, who's never held a football in his life, apparently. And Matt Prater missed 2 huge crucial field goals because they didn't have the holder right. It's just there's so much more that goes into it. So it pisses me off when people are like, "Well, they only have one job. I could do that." No, you couldn't. Sit down.
This brings back flashbacks to Tony Romo as a holder, and I can't do it right now. So, who's your all-time favorite kicker that's not your dad? Don't do a spit.
I don't know. Even without that disclaimer, he might not have been first. Man, I don't know. I have a soft spot for Tyler Bass, signed jersey behind me. I was very high on him last season. I wrote an article at the beginning of last season about kickers and like arguing the randomness and explaining the things that you can look at. But I also included several paragraphs about, Justin Tucker sings opera, or this story about why he does a certain thing, and just like get to know these people. They're still people. And like,
Right.
I think the way that kickers get talked about is fucking insane. I just think it's really weird and aggressive. So I'm like, I just wanted to like give some flesh to these numbers that run out on the field. And Tyler Bass wears the one side of eye black. He's like, everybody on the team talks about him like he's a football player. He's not just our kicker. He's not some guy. He's a football player. He will be out there helping us do whatever we need help doing. And he wears the one side of eye black because of his grandma. And it's just, I just adore him.
That's awesome. My I'm in a home league with there's a bunch of kids that are on my wife's side of the family, and they never played before. And one of the dads was like, "You should draft a kicker first." And the kid, first pick overall, took Tyler Bass. But I mean, he ended up doing pretty well in
My
that
kind of
league.
guy.
So and he
The,
didn't know. And then afterwards, he was like blushing, like, "Oh my gosh, I should have. It'll be
huh.
fine, dude."
The thing with like, and I think a lot of people assume this about me is they'll be like, oh, you probably take a kicker in the 10th round and you always take blah, blah, blah. I'm never drafting a kicker before, depending on what defenses are left. If you play in with defense special teams, like most
Mhm.
home average leagues do.
And nobody cries about never anyway.
But if depending on what's left at defense, kicker is either second to last or dead last, depending on what direction I want to go with those two. But I'm almost constantly streaming both of those positions week in and week out. So the perception that because I like kickers, I'm drafting them super early. Like I'm still, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I think they're fun to play with.
Right.
Just
And
that's it.
they're fun, and there's strategy involved with streaming, like you were saying, and that's really awesome that you tap into that. And I do the same thing. I draft a kicker at the very end, or don't, or if they allow you to not draft a kicker, and then you can pick one up before the season
Yep.
starts. And I'm about that life too. Just, um,
I think that's why I like redraft better. Streaming
yeah.
is so fun for me. Like
Mhm.
getting that right. Oh, it feels good.
It does.
And
I
so
love that.
and you can't do that in Dynasty. There's not like an option on the waiver wire in
Yeah,
Dynasty.
right. You're like plugging some dude in and gets like negative 3
Never even heard of
points
this
because he fell.
guy.
Yeah.
You're up.
Yeah, it's your turn. It's your turn. Um, so when I like to do a little bit of research. Not I don't go like crazy on stalk you or anything, but when I type your name in, I get that you've guested on a lot of different podcasts. Do you think it's important to guest on podcasts to kind of help build your craft and get you comfortable?
I think it definitely helped me be more comfortable. And I did a ton of guest shows. My first full season podcasting, I was behind the mic and camera like 4 to 5 times a week out of 7 days. I made it a rule that on Saturdays and Sundays I wouldn't do it. On Friday nights, I actually get together with a group of friends. We just call it happy hour, but we just get on a Zoom and bullshit, and it's a blast. Got to meet all of them in Canton, going to hang out with some of them in February. So that's a lot of fun. But I specifically set out times where I was like, I'm not doing it at that time because I need that time for me. So like I said, be able to say no. But I think it's really important to guest on a lot of pods. And I went on some that I would never go back on if they asked me. And I went on some that still reign supreme that were a ton of fun. So like trial and error, there's going to be a ton of it.
Mhm. I get you on that. I totally feel you, and when you're on podcasts with other people, you're learning from them. It's really an interesting thing to see how everybody's style's different. So, it's really cool in that aspect. Now, hold on. You were talking about something that made me want to get more into that, but I got lost again. See, here's my ADHD. Uh, so golf. Let's go back to golf. I
Mhm.
want to know about because I love to bounce around, and I want to go back to golf real quick. Do you play golf now, or do you watch golf now?
I watch a ton of golf. I love watching it. I play sparingly. I've had 2 shoulder surgeries and then basically just kind of I mean, like, I can still hit a golf ball, but I can't play to the caliber that I used to, and because of that, I don't like to play because it feels like I suck, and that pisses me off. So, I just
Yeah,
really prefer
right.
to watch. But, like, if I'm gonna go out and, like, drink beers and hang out and, like, play a relaxed game, it's fine, but I don't do any like we have 2 separate golf courses in town and they'll run tournaments and stuff, and the pros out there are like, "Why don't you come play?" And I'm like, "Because I'm not good anymore." No, just let me
That's
be.
okay. That's okay. I used to. You were talking about running and stuff. I used to do that back in the day. You can't tell now, but like that,
Oh,
so
man.
I'm
You're
like,
like a
I would never.
cross-country kid?
No, I was sprinted. I
Oh
was a
my god,
sprinter.
that's, like I don't know if that's
I
worse.
couldn't do
I
cross
feel
country. I mean, I did cross country in my senior year, but I was like, long distance running for me is a 200-meter dash. Like, that's long distance
Yeah.
for me. Let me just get it over with. Are you a competitive person by nature?
Yes, it's a problem. Like, I will about anything. Listen, it's so bad. I take the stairs at work. We're on the 4th story. I don't so much like elevators, especially the elevators at our office. They're, like, still moving when they open.
Oh,
I don't like it at
no.
all. Yeah,
Nope.
they're awful. So I'll take the stairs. If I and on the way down, especially, I will race people. They don't know we're racing, but I'll, like, see somebody get on the elevator to go to the to the 1st floor, and I'm like, "It's on." And I'll just, like,
You're just like,
sprint down the stairs and then get out and just try to breathe normal so they don't know I was running. Like, they didn't even know I was
you're like,
racing, but I won.
but I won. I love that.
They're
I
like,
love the competitive. I get you. I get you. That's great. And you here's a s- I want to talk about this guy. There's this guy in your life, or there was a guy that was in your life. His name was Blake Jarwin. Is he still in your life?
Yeah, his jersey's over there. I was talking to actually my happy hour buddies today said about maybe next year Blake Jarwin will break out. And I was like, all right, the horse is dead, sprinkle its ashes. It's fine. I get it. And then they were like, we're really proud of you. And immediately I was like, but if he wouldn't have torn his ACL, like
Oh,
I would have
yeah.
been right. Just so we're clear, I would have been so fucking right.
You would
I
have
didn't get that
that
chance, but I would have been.
set
That's
up.
what
Tight end
that
is set
kills
up to
me.
succeed in Dallas. So, yep.
Yeah.
Stinks to see that happen. Hate to see it
Yeah.
happen. You
I can't
hate
wait
to
to
see it happen.
I can't wait to pick the wrong one again this season.
Yes. Well, we already talked about how, yeah, good luck. Which one's the sleeper this year? Which tight end, so it's which
It's the worst. I love it. I love that's when it really feels good to hit on a stream when you get the right tight end. They score like a touchdown. You're like, I'm a genius.
amen. That feeling is something that you can't describe. It's so wonderful. Who's your favorite Broncos player?
Oh, on the roster right now,
Let's go
Brandon
on the
McManus.
roster
No.
right now. Okay, no. How about of all time?
Man, I think we
Ooh,
gotta shout out Demaryius Thomas because
yeah.
of, the tragedy that happened there. I loved Demaryius Thomas. He was one of the first, wide receivers and players that I, like, really got attached to when I started watching football regularly and the Broncos regularly and started buying merch and being like, "I'm committed now." Like, I have a freaking Trevor Siemian jersey. I am committed.
Yes.
And, so that was probably the big one for me. It was great to get to be a Peyton Manning fan for a little while. You
Mhm.
know, Unfortunately for me, it really looks like I bandwagoned because we went to 2 Super Bowls the first, like, 3 years that I was avidly watching. I'm like, it was just an accident. Like, I swear I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to do it like this.
Doesn't that suck? Yeah, you're like, way to jump on the bandwagon. Nah, dude.
Yeah, no, I didn't even know who Peyton Manning was when I started watching the NFL, okay?
Yeah,
I
right. Didn't we already
couldn't have
establish
possibly
that
guessed.
you weren't watching the NFL prior to playing fantasy football, which that still blows my mind. I get people that come on here that are like, we didn't have internet back in the day and I had to do it that way, but I can't imagine like I only watch college
Yeah,
NFL.
well, I was just guessing. There was a lot of trusting site projections,
Yeah.
which is a thing that you kind of, like, learn to stop doing as time goes on, but there was a lot of trusting that when I was, like, setting a lineup, but like I said, just, like, the act of setting the lineup and keeping an eye on it, and at the time, like I said, at the time, I was working 12-hour shifts every day, trying like, sometimes my kid came to work with me and sat in her fucking basket in the back of the restaurant, so I was busy, but that was a time where I could, like, have to myself to, like, whether it was Sunday mornings or Thursday evenings before games started or whatever, where I could take 10 minutes to myself and focus on this thing. And of course, now it's like a 45-minute sit down to focus with myself, but I think that's okay.
Yeah. When you give advice to people, when people ask you for advice, do you ever feel like, I hope I don't give the wrong advice? Or are you pretty confident in what you're putting out there? Um,
I usually go with advice-wise, just be yourself. There was
mhm,
a lot
mhm.
of, you're going to have to curse less or do this differently in respects to me when I was trying to, start creating content. And I refuse to put myself in that box. This is who I am. I'm loud, I'm obnoxious, I talk too much, but those are all parts of me, and they're not parts I'm willing to cut ties with. So I think that's really crucial. And like I said, not everybody's going to like you. You can't expect everybody to like you. Everybody probably shouldn't like you. I think you're way too neutral good if everybody likes you.
Yeah.
You should have some haters. It's going to happen. And that's fine. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. You guys are different people, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I just think it's really important to remain true to yourself, because then in the off chance that you've presented this false persona to people, and then the true you slips, and there's
Yeah.
the confusion about which is the real you, and things can get messy and ugly in a heartbeat.
Yeah, you can get found out real quick, real quick. So just be
Yeah.
yourself. Just be yourself. And not everybody is made for podcasting. Some people are just made for writing, and some people are just made for being in front of the camera. And it's kind of like you said earlier, trial and error with all
Yeah,
of that.
find your niche, man. Like Jake Trowbridge crushes it at singing his songs.
Is
Good writes fantastic joke tweets. There are people in every, we talked about Matt Harmon to start the show. If I have a wide receiver question, that's the dude I'm going to. Like, that's the dude whose advice I'm going to read or take in. So find whatever is the thing you're good at. There is fantasy football, TikTok, Facebook, Discord. It's everywhere. In every form that you could ever take it in, it exists. Find the one you're good at, because I promise you, you are going to hit the head. You're going to hit the nail somewhere. Like, it's going to happen. You just have to figure out what it is that you can do well.
And don't get discouraged if the first thing doesn't work
Yeah.
out. The second thing, prior to this, I was doing a podcast with somebody else, and I want to have evergreen content. That's another thing. Doing podcasts and putting out advice and doing all that stuff, it has to be fresh. It has to be in the moment. You can't wait 3 days to put it out. So how do you make sure that you keep yourself on a schedule?
Boy, we talked earlier, and I don't remember if it was when we were recording or not, about how crucial routine is. I have a very strict routine with my kid, bedtime, wind down time, all the things. For me, I have a very strict routine throughout the week. I keep a planner. I write everything down. I know, and people are like, "Why don't you do it in your phone?" Because if I type it into my phone, there's a 0% chance I'm gonna remember. You know how much shit I type on my phone in a day?
Yeah.
You want me to remember the one appointment I set? So I write everything in a written planner. I take pride in buying a new planner every year. This year I have one with swear words. It's
That's
hilarious.
awesome.
It's fun to update.
Love it.
It has stickers and everything. And so
Dope.
routine is crucial for me, getting and doing a show that's like Locked on Pokes, that's 5 days a week. And you're talking about all the different sports. Basketball right now, college basketball is like 3 days a week. Sometimes we have games. So trying to hit on everything, plus wins and losses, and men's and women's. And because I don't want to forget about the women. So I talk about women's basketball and tennis and cross country, and I try to cover all of it. And it's just keeping a written agenda of what needs to be done and marking shit out when you've finished it. Because that part is the part that feels good, is the crossing it off part. So you have to do it.
You have to do it. You have to do
Oh
it.
my God. I knew you were a writer like me.
I just got it because I was like, okay, my 2021, I don't know. I left it out in the rain and it got all messed up. But yes, I can't do my phone. My wife's like, why don't you use the calendar in your phone for everything? She uses the calendar in the phone for everything. I'm like, sorry, I guess I'm old school, but I can't do it that way. My brain doesn't want me to do it that way.
I don't even know where the calendar button is on my phone. It's for tweeting and texting, and that's really about it.
That's all we really need, guys. That's all that's really...
Until I started watching TikTok for 3 hours at night before I went to bed, which is a problem. I've had to start scheduling in TikTok time.
I feel like you and I are on the same wavelength, man. There's so much. I'm like, years. I'm like, yeah, yep, exactly. I feel you on all of that. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up because we've had a wonderful wonderful conversation, but obviously you guys can tell that I'm getting a little scatterbrained. But I do want you to go ahead, Linda, and first of all, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And then second of all, I want you to go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you and all of the cool stuff you have going on.
Well, thank you for having me on. Like I said, I was very excited to be here, so I'm glad we got to do it. You can find me on Twitter at Lindellians, or however you want to pronounce it. You can find in season my kicker tiers on Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life newsletter. And, I'm on Locked On Pokes. We do Fantasy Besties. We're kind of taking a break right now. 2 of the Fantasy Besties just became dads, so they're very busy. And, one just became a dad, one had his second kid. So very busy over there. Mostly you can find me acting a mess on Twitter, which is my favorite thing to do. So thank you again, Casey, for having me on.
Not a problem at all. It was a great time. I said awesome like a million times because it was so exciting to have you on. So everybody, make sure that you go and follow Linda, go check out all of her stuff, and then make sure to come back next week as well for another episode of Get Real with Casey Kasem. And remember to stay rad.